ladies, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Liz, the Flourishing Hippie. I wanted to quickly apologize for the delay. I have a bit of a cold at the moment, but I'm really excited to share these 3 fall and Halloween inspired DIYs for this season. So without further ado, let's jump into this week's video. For DIY number 1, I was originally inspired by the idea of finding a thrifted painting and painting a ghost. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a thrifted painting that worked, so I decided I would paint 2 pumpkins in watercolor. I haven't used watercolor since I was a kid, so after watching many YouTube videos on watercolor and how to build on colors, plus a test run, I felt I could try my hand at it. I started by mixing the color tone I wanted for my first pumpkins in the Cinderella blue-green color. I started painting the smaller pumpkin first by creating an oval shape for the center of the pumpkin and moving out by creating 2 crescent shapes on either side of the center shape in the palest color. Once my first mini pumpkin was painted, I started on the taller pumpkin, repeating the same steps. I then built up the color of the blue-green tone on the top and bottom of the pumpkin to give it more depth and shape. Once the pumpkins were dry, I finished the pumpkins by mixing a brown and green color for the stem, vines, and leaves. I continued to add darker tones throughout until I reached the desired look. For the second pumpkin, I went with a standard orange pumpkin, completing the same steps I followed for the first pumpkin painting. For DIY number 2, Pinterest made me do it. I was completely inspired by all the ghost garlands I saw. Fortunately, organizing a couple months ago, I found some fall fabric from Joann's that I completely forgot I had bought years ago and knew it would be perfect for this DIY. I started by folding the original larger piece of fabric into fourths and then cutting down to 4 smaller pieces for all 5 fabrics. I then took small foam balls I purchased from Michael's and placed hot glue in 3 different spots around the sides, avoiding the top of the foam ball so I could easily hang the ghosts. Once all the ghosts were created and in an order that looked nice, I began to string the ghosts. I decided on using a strong twine string, and with a larger needle and a yarn needle was able to string the ghosts through. I finished off the garland with tassels and a wooden bead. I did have to super glue the twine on the tassel to keep it locked in place. I would advise doing less ghosts as it ends up becoming heavier than expected, but overall I think the ghost garland turned out so cute. Finally, for DIY number 3, I was inspired by Pottery Barn's black terracotta pumpkins, but knew I wasn't going to spend $60+ on a single pumpkin. This DIY did take quite a bit of time, but I think the end result is worth it. I got the 2 mini paper mache pumpkins from Michael's and the 5 larger paper mache pumpkins from Joann's. I started by drawing out the faces I wanted for each pumpkin, and then using an X-Acto knife carefully cut out the faces I drew. Once the faces were cut out, I then used air-dried clay to create more realistic pumpkin stems for all the pumpkins. The clay takes anywhere from 1 to 3 days to dry, luckily only 1 day in this case. After the stems were dry, I then used a black matte spray paint inside the pumpkins as the paper mache was very visible. After another day of drying, I was able to paint all the pumpkins. I painted all the pumpkins using Delta Creative's acrylic paint in the color Rain Gray as the base, and mixed in Deco Art Americana's acrylic paint and graphite to add a darker tone. Any place I felt might need a little brightness, I used Folk Art's acrylic paint in white. I mixed the Rain Gray base paint with baking soda to create the stone texture. Once the first coat of paint was dry, I went in with another coat, adding more texture with the baking soda and graphite color paint to give it more of a stone feel and look. When the second coat of paint was dry, I finished with the last step of the process by adding highlights with white chalk and blending out the color as much as possible. I absolutely love how these Pottery Barn terracotta pumpkin dupes turned out. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please give it a like. Please subscribe down below. Until next time, keep flourishing. Bye guys.